Okay, but to say that a dinosaur turned into a bird, how do you really check that?
Well, you check it by, if there was evolution that took place to convert theropod dinosaurs into modern avians, we would expect intermediate forms, even if they're very sporadic, because if you take Gould's punctuated equilibrium theory, this evolution could primarily have happened in the fringes of the population where fossilization is rare, and et cetera. But let's just say that a good way to verify the theory or to give everybody impetus to think that you really do have to have some kind of strong counter evidence that we're going to accept this operationally would be to find intermediate forms like Archaeopteryx.
Wait.
We have found these things.
Do you really believe Archaeopteryx is intermediate?
It looks pretty darn intermediate to me. When I look at it, I see wings. I see teeth.
Can I ask you a question real quick before we get on to Archaeopteryx? If you look at an Archaeopteryx skeletal, a fossil, and you look at some, other type of dinosaur that you feel turned into Archaeopteryx, how do you get the conclusion that one turned into the other? Without already assuming that one turned... Because whenever you look at the fossils, you're already assuming that one turned into the other. How does it tell you that one turned into the other?
It doesn't prove it.
No. How does it... Without you casting your interpretation on these fossils, how do they independently tell you that one... Yeah, how do they tell you this?
If you saw... Okay, so the beef that we all have here is that, we have birds, and we have lizards. And we think of dinosaurs as just being big lizards, right? That's what the word means, terrible lizards.
Okay.
So we don't see intermediate forms that exist today between lizards and birds. We don't see a creature like Archaeopteryx floating down from the top of a pine tree. If they ever existed, they don't exist now.
That depends on what features you're looking for, I guess.
Well, okay, so the intermediate features would be things like wings that are sort of half-winged. They don't fully function. They might let you glide or flap or beat the ground or something, but they're not fully flight capable. You're
still calling these transitional. What independent evidence is telling you that one turned into the other?
Nowhere else in nature do I see a wing that on a lizard.
Yeah, that's half-formed. Well, couldn't that be an example of extinction instead of...
Well, it surely is an example of extinction, but extinction has to happen if natural selection is the operating law.
But see, you're assuming, most extinction just leads to the end of the species, like the dodo bird, they're just simply gone. The fact that something's extinct does not prove it turned to something else. The dodo bird didn't turn to something else other than supper.
That's true, because that's because the dodo bird was not naturally selected out. It was artificially selected out by humans. Okay,
so if why would that make a difference? Even if something is naturally selected out, that's still you could still.
It doesn't make the total difference. You're right. I'm sort of half copying out on that because some species go extinct because they were taken over by
some other species,
a mutant offshoot, or it could be that they were just destroyed by some kind of event.
So, from my perspective, it is not a good argument to say. First of all, I don't think it's a good argument to use fossils as evidence for evolution at all.
I think you're totally wrong about that.
Well, I know you do, but you can't prove they had any children. Well, I'm still stuck here. Just look, if you take two fossils and you look at them, how are you going to get the idea that one turned into the other? Why don't you just say these are two distinctly different creatures?
It's hard to show you what I mean with that drawing a picture right in front of you, but you don't necessarily believe that one turned directly into the other.
Well, one population of one fossil type turned into another population.
That's close to the truth, but it's more like you have a bunch of cousins, and the cousins bleed one into the other.
Well, I know, but what is giving you this? How can you think that any type of dinosaur you want turned into Archaeopteryx? Where do you get the idea that this population turned into this type of creature? Well, there's one key point I want to make here. Do the theropod dinosaurs, there are two types of hips in dinosaurs, the lizard hip and the bird hip, right?
Right.
And you're aware that they're extremely different, the way the ilium faces and everything else, right?
Oh, I know that they are modifications. Whatever. They are distinguished.
They're very different. One faces the wrong way, okay? The muscles would have to totally be restructured to change the hips around like that. Now, do the theropod dinosaurs have bird hips or lizard hips?
I think that the theropod hips, like on Velociraptor, were turned backwards like a bird.
So I think if you'll ask most evolutionists who study this, they will say several things. Number one, the lizard hip dinosaurs turned into the birds, which makes another real serious problem, turning the hip bones around.
That does sound like a problem, Ken. I'm not denying this. Not every evolutionist believes the dinosaurs to birth theory. This is just one hypothesis.
Okay. Alan Paducci at University North Carolina, Chapel Hill, probably considered one of the world's experts on the evolution of birds, and he believes in the evolution of birds, the dinosaurs.
Can I just ask one question before we get too off topic?
Okay.
Evolution, if it happens with one species to another species that are just far enough apart to call it macroevolution, that's really what we're talking about here, right? We're talking about the general phenomenon,
right?
Not the specific theropod to avian.
Well, one species to another species is a bit equivocal because, dogs and wolves are both classified as different.
That's a bad example because...
well, if you say macroevolution is species to species, then that's a bad definition because, yes, speciation does occur.
Yeah,
but that's not what we're talking about.
Well, let's just say, another example that could work is perhaps land mammal to whale. If I showed that was actually correct, that happened, then that would lend a lot more credence to the idea that it could happen for, like, dinosaurs to birds or mammals to humans.
Okay, to prove that a land mammal turned to a water-dwelling mammal, such as a whale or a dolphin,
right?
I think you would have literally billions of anatomical changes that would not fossilize, the nervous system, the circulatory system, the respiratory system.
That's true.
All you're getting are bones, okay?
Right.
First of all, you're only getting bones. Second of all, the bones are not having babies. They're only bones you find in the dirt. And so we have to assume that they had children at all. Then we have to assume that they had different children. If you found bones of the dodo bird and assumed it turned to something else, you would be totally wrong in your assumption. It simply went extinct.
That's right. And a lot of these intermediate forms are not directly on the line of descent.
So I think from a practical perspective, that's why I continually say it is not fair to call evolution science. It is purely a religion people believe in.
That's a jump there, Kent. I don't see how you went from that to that. I mean, that's just a huge leap.
We don't see it happen. Logically, you couldn't prove such a thing.
We don't see black holes forming either. We've never seen that happen.
So it is a leap of faith to say that black holes even form. First of all, okay.
Yes. Okay. Fine. And on that, and if you're gonna define leap of faith to be that narrow, or easy, then sure.
But I think the type of evidence used to support the black hole theory is very different than the type of evidence used to support the evolution theory.
So?
It's nowhere similar.
So?
Well, so it's a leap of faith to say that because we see this, therefore this, therefore because we see A, therefore B.
It's not logic. It's not A and B implies C, A and B, therefore C. It's not that kind of logical chain. We're talking about, like, induction, and science is not math. I am a math grad student. I understand the difference. And they don't use proof in science like we do. If I held evolutionists to the rigor of proof standards that I use in my classes, they would never get a passing grade, and you know that. That's why, like, nobody can fulfill your challenge.
Correct.
Because you're asking for too much.
No, I'm asking if they want me to pay for this to be taught. Jared, I want to ask you a kind of a convoluted question, but since you're a math major, which I was also, I think you probably figured this out. If you were in my shoes, if you believed like I believe, would you believe that your position is, do you see why I see your position as being weak and not science and purely religious? Do you at least understand why I see that?
Yes.
Okay. That's what I want to know. Because I don't want to be illogical. I think it is logical to say, if someone says they believe that a dinosaur turned to a bird or a rock turned to a human over a longer span of time, then they ought to have some more evidence other than they have. I look at the evidence they have and say, this is, first of all, most of it's simply wrong. The gill slits on the embryo, et cetera, simply lies.
Well, come on, they call them pharyngeal clefts.
Okay, yeah, still. The evidence they use for evolution in general, if you look at my video number 4, is either lies or extremely weak, and in a court of law would never hold up.